So it is 2:15 p.m. in Uzbekistan, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all. Very good afternoon to the one-week International Faculty Development Program on accelerating equality and empowerment of women in all spheres. We started this on 8th of May, wherein we had two sessions on that day. Professor Vibhuti Patel, who has been a very active resource person and a participant also in our FDP. She had a session of accelerating equality and empowerment through feminist foreign policy. The second session on the first day was about accelerating equality and empowerment through healthcare. We had another eminent speaker, Professor Veena Vaswani, Director, Center of Ethics, Yenepoya, deemed to be University Mangalore. Yesterday, it was the second day. The third session was about the accelerating equality and empowerment through education by our very esteemed guest and resource person, Professor Indira Rama Rao, formerly Professor of Sociology, University of Mysore. And the fourth session was about deconstruction of the diva by our in-house resource person, Dr. Supriya Banerjee, Assistant Professor, Amity University in Tashkent. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the third day of our International Faculty Development Program, which is for 1 week, and this is the fifth session. The fifth session will be about the accelerating equality and empowerment through gainful employment. And for this session, today we have with us Professor Paramita Saha. I'd like to introduce ma'am. Professor Paramita Saha teaches economics in Tripura University, a central university in Tripura, a northeastern state of India. She joined here in 1990 as lecturer, and now she's a professor. Her research interest lies in the social sector issues, population aging, and gender economics. Her PhD research was on population aging in Tripura, and she has a number of research publications to her credit and co-edited one book titled Aging in the Northeast, Tripura Perspective. She is a PhD research supervisor. Presently, she holds the additional charge of Director of Women's Studies Center, Tripura University. She has collaborated with organizations such as National Institute of Rural Development, National Commission for Women, National Human Rights Commission, Association of Indian Universities, Institute of Human Development, 13th Finance Commission, and many more. She is an executive committee member of Northeast Economic Association and life member of several professional bodies, including Indian Association of Women's Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Amity University in Tashkent, I welcome Professor Paramita Saha, ma'am. And ma'am, I'd like you to take the opportunity to please address the gathering.
Thank you, Dr. Shalka. A very good afternoon to all. First and foremost, my thanks to the organizers for holding this very timely event in the 1 year of Accelerating Equality 2023. I must also thank Dr. Anita for making me part of this. I'm honored and humbled to be in the company of such illustrious academicians. It's a privilege to have the opportunity of listening to such wonderful speakers. Without much ado, and I'm also to thank Professor Vibhuti Patel, who has actually put me through this. Thank you, ma'am. I think I should share my screen now. My topic, as you see, I will talk on equality and empowerment of women through gainful employment. First of all, let me share my screen.
Your screen is visible, ma'am.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
I think I should now go on to tell you my discussion thread, what I will take up. Yeah, this. I have tried to discuss how gainful employment is instrumental for equity and empowerment of women. I begin with recounting the milestones of women's movement starting with a brief discussion on the struggle for equality, I touch upon how policy emphasis on women have evolved from being welfarist towards women to empowerment-oriented, ensuring access to credit and skill building to raise capabilities are the two instruments for women empowerment. I tried to examine this from a gender's perspective. The status of women entrepreneurs in India is discussed next. My attempt is to highlight how women entrepreneurs are different with the help of some case studies. And now these three words, equality, empowerment, and gainful employment, acquire many layers when we discuss from women's perspective. Also, I must mention that issues beyond the gender binary is not included in my discussion, mainly because the topic given to me mentions women empowerment clearly. Next slide. Yes, you see, the human concern about equality and unjust consequences of its absence is not recent. Rousseau's celebrated essay on discourse on the origin and foundations of inequality among men was published way back in 1754. But women's concern was not specifically addressed at the time. Beginning with the demand of equal pay for equal work, and then equality in rights and opportunities, right to work has been central to women's movement in general. In the late 19th century and the early 20th century, the first wave of feminism aimed at acquiring equal rights for women and was concerned with their right to earn their living. Discrimination of women in the public sphere, society's denial of giving them access to education, politics, and financial independence, and general intellectual life, subordination of women were the issues the first wave of feminists deliberated upon and tried to change. Publication of a Vindication of the Rights of Women in 1792 by Mary Wollstonecraft, Subjection of Women by John Stuart Mill, and the women's suffrage movements provided the intellectual basis for the women's struggle for equality. Nearer to our time, the publication of the book, Women's Role in Economic Development, also this was mentioned by Professor Patel, one cannot but mention it, by Esther Busra, made the world sit up and take note. The book marked an important step in understanding the position of women in development economics. Bostrup was the first to point out the unequal impact development has on men and women, that economic growth and especially the spread of capitalism in the developing world had not necessarily benefited women and men equally, uniformly. She used empirical work from Africa, Asia, and Latin America to support her conclusions that women were being left behind as subsistence producers using primitive techniques in the agricultural sector, as low-paid workers in non-farm and urban sectors, and as unpaid workers in rural areas, contributing to farm productivity following the outmigration of men. Women's role in economic development has since become a classic text. It is a key reference book for anyone interested in gender and development analysis. This book provided the intellectual underpinning of the women in development analysis and had a lasting influence on the development of theoretical, conceptual, and policy thinking in the fields of women gender and development. It was the aftermath of the publication of this book that 1975 was declared as United Nations International Women's Year. And the first ever Women Conference was held in Mexico. In run-up to that, Government of India commissioned a committee on the status for women in India to be presented there in 1974 towards equality report was published. This report laid the foundation of women's movement in independent India. It was an eye-opener. The much trumpeted notion of constitutional equality notwithstanding, the report showed the unequal condition of women in India as reflected in demographic trends of declining sex ratio, disparities in life expectancy, and disparities in death rates between men and women, and the difficulties involved in women's access to literacy, education, and livelihood. It was of the view that Indian state had failed in its constitutional responsibility of gender equality. It's only fitting that we are holding this FDP when we are on the verge of the 50th year of publication of Towards Equality report. From 1976 to 1985, it was declared a decade for women. A lot of things happened in these years, but one most prominent was the Convention on Elimination of All Sorts of Discrimination Against Women in 1981, which India ratified in 1993. CEDAW provided the normative environment within which advocates of women's rights could voice their demands. Whereas in the early 1970s, women had been seen as passive recipients of support and assistance, the emphasis from 1975 onwards was on national governments developing strategies to give women equal access to educational and employment opportunities, political representation and participation, and physical and social welfare. Two decades after 1975, in 1995, Beijing Conference was held. While the efforts of the 2 decades prior to 1995, starting with the Mexico Conference, had helped improve some women's conditions and access to resources, they had not changed the basic structure of inequality in the relationship between men and women. Decisions that affected all people's lives were still being made mostly by men. Ways had to be sought to empower women so that they could bring their own priorities and values as equal partners in decision-making processes at all levels. The 4th World Conference on Women held in Beijing reiterated that women's rights were human rights indeed, and gender equality was an issue of universal concerns for everyone's concerns. Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action proclaim gender mainstreaming as a key strategy for addressing gender inequalities. While women in development approaches are based on a politics of access, the gender and development approach recognizes the importance of redistributing power in social relations and directly challenging the male privilege. No doubt, such policies will generate or will tend to create resistance and opposition. And after all these years, let's see how things have progressed. In the initial years of women movement, more than equality, power, and status, third world women were rather concerned with survival and development. Scholars like Bosrup and Bolding and others have noted often economic development in the underdeveloped countries leads to structural changes that dislocate women from income generating occupations. Development do not benefit men and women equally. Anti-poverty approach to development was more concerned with redistribution along with growth and ensuring basic needs. Its purpose was to ensure poor women increase their productivity and contribute to the process of economic development. Women's poverty was seen as a problem of underdevelopment, not their subordination. The role of power structure in gender relations and patriarchy play in determining the status of women was not explicitly considered in the development framework. In the 80s, the emphasis shifted to women as agents of change, the context of a declining world economy. With serious cuts in welfare spending, it was imperative that women became crucial actors in the development process. Policies were taken to ensure credit for women, supplementary income generating projects for women, micro enterprises for women, and so on. And finally, you can sum up like this, that it is through gainful employment that women has traversed most of the distance that separated her from the male, and nothing else can guarantee her liberty in practice. I quote Simone de Beauvoir. The consequence of all this, we can still see some facts and find that even now, after all these years, women remain less likely to participate in the labor market than men around the world. Women are more likely to be unemployed than men. Women are overrepresented in informal and vulnerable employment. Globally, women are paid less than men. Women are still less likely to have access to social protection. Women are less likely than men to have access to financial institutions or have bank account. Women are less likely to be entrepreneurs and face more disadvantages starting business. Labor force participation rate for women aged 25 to 54 is 63% compared to 94% of men. When including younger ages, aged 15 years and up, and older women aged 55 and up, in 2018, women's global labor force participation rate is even lower at 48.5%, 26.5 percentage points below that of men. In 2017, global unemployed rates of men and women stood at 5.5% and 6.2% respectively. This is projected to remain relatively unchanged through 2021, and after the pandemic, the situation must have worsened, given that more women than men lost work during that time. Historically, in high-income countries, participation in the formal economy has been the most important route to women empowerment and increased gender equality. Although in the past, increasing demand for labor as a result of economic growth was the main mechanism leading to women's increased participation in formal employment and increased gender equality, future economic growth in developing countries is unlikely to be enough to produce similar results, particularly in the context of job loss with the advent of artificial intelligence and etc. Policy interventions by development actors, including governments and the private sector, are crucial in increasing women's access to formal employment and promote their equality. Women are heavily represented in the informal economy, where their exposure to risk and exploitation is usually greatest, and they have the least formal protection. But most of all, women still bear disproportionate responsibility for unpaid care and domestic work. Unpaid care work is essential to the functioning of the economy, but often mostly goes uncounted and unrecognized. Women tend to spend around 2.5 times more time on unpaid care and domestic work than men. The amount of time devoted to unpaid care work is negatively correlated with female labor force participation. Women are overburdened, undervalued. Their substantial contribution to development needs to be recognized, along with a redistribution of its benefits and burdens between men and women. The empowerment approach believes in transformatory potential for development initiatives. Empowerment in the context of women's development is a way of defining, challenging, and overcoming the barriers in a woman's life through which she increases her ability to shape her life and environment. It is an active, multidimensional process which should enable women to realize their full identity and power in all spheres of life. In the given context, entrepreneurship development and income generating activities are the feasible instruments for empowering women. It generates income and also provides flexible working hours according to the needs of the homemakers. Let us now look at the barriers of women participation in labor force in India. The gender disparity in Indian labor market widened due to decline in female labor force participation, especially in rural areas. Two contradictory views are put forward to explain the drastic fall in female labor force participation in the economic survey of 2019-20. They say increased household income and women pursuing higher education and number of women pursuing education led to lower female labor force participation. An opposing view is it is actually because of the lack of employment opportunity or self-employment, lower wages, long hours spent in commuting, work timings, unfavorable work timings, and most of all, safety issues and gender-based violence restricting women's mobility and freedom resulted in lowering of female labor force participation. In response to this, the initiatives in India was around the creation of employment opportunities, skilling, access to credit, and safety measures. Development can become inclusive only when it creates employment and enables a large number of men and women in the country to earn income. Even though economic survey this year has emphasized the role of private capital in creating employment, there has been 33% hike in budgetary capital expenditure, increased allocation for railways infrastructure, urban infrastructure, construction fund, green infrastructure mission, 500 waste to wealth schemes. All these are expected to create new employment in general. Or skilling of workers. Projects are taken up under Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, National Apprenticeship Promotion Scheme will train 47 lakh young people. Skill India digital platform, along with the Skill India International Center, will train people according to needs and standards of national and international employers. This is expected to encourage self-employment. For women, of course, this is in general. For women, the emphasis is on self-employment through SSGs. SSGs are to be the drivers of rural development. In India, a significant proportion of women, usually engaged in domestic duties, reported their willingness to accept work if the work was made available at the household premises. This is from an ILO report. According to this, Of the total women usually engaged in domestic duties, 34% in rural areas and about 28% in urban areas reported their willingness to accept work in both rural and urban areas. Given this, the schemes for safety and empowerment in India are under Mission Shakti, which comprised of 2 umbrella programs, Sambal and Samat. In Mission Shakti, the budgetary allocation this year has been reduced. Under Sambal, we have old schemes like One Stop Center, Women Helpline, and Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Nari Adalat, Women Police Volunteers. Here allocation remains unchanged this year. Under Shamurthu, we have schemes like Ujjala, ensuring cooking gas to the women, widow homes, working women's hostel, national creche scheme, Palna, Pradhan Mantri Matri Bandhana Yojana, research, skilling, training, national hub of women empowerment, etc. For all this, allocation has been reduced. While there is policy promises to increase efforts to create employment and security of women, budgetary allocations do not match those promises. Regarding safety, allocation under Ministry of Road Transport and Highways for safety of women on public road transport scheme, the allocation is increased to 50 crores. The recently introduced labor codes, Code on Wages 2019, Industrial Relations Code 2020, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Codes 2020, and Code on Social Security 2020. These guides the conditions of employees or workers. These labor codes came under criticism for including some provisions which appears to be detrimental to the interest of the women workers, like permission to night shift for women, reduction in maternity benefits, curtailment of creche provisions, etc. In addition, MG and REGA allocations have been drastically reduced, though this is a scheme benefiting women by protecting their income in the times of crisis. Sorry. Yeah. The SCSG initiative through Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana under National Rural Livelihood Mission, 81 lakh SCSGs have been mobilized during the last few years. There is proposal to make this economically viable by ensuring raw material supply, branding of products, and help in marketing. However, allocation for these are not clearly mentioned in the budget document. In the context of economic development, poverty alleviation, the empowerment approach focuses on self-help efforts of the poor, rather than providing them with social welfare. Microfinance emerged as an attractive instrument for fostering development and alleviation of poverty. Women were thought of as potential beneficiaries. The central aim of microfinance institutions is that access to microcredit enables women to establish a microenterprise, and this represented a route out of poverty. But very few SSGs were able to set up income generating activities for its members, could sustain it in the long run. Lack of skill was identified as the factors responsible. Microfinance was hailed as a tool for poverty reduction and women's empowerment because of its emphasis on self-sustainability, individual entrepreneurship, and self-help. and also guaranteed repayment of bank loan. This was compatible with the neoliberal vision of development and shifting the responsibility of development from states to individuals. Linking informal and formal credit, guaranteed repayment of loans were the arguments that made microfinance attractive. But the basis itself was gendered notion of women honor in repayment. What were the realities? In many studies, it was noted that access to microcredit, given the prevailing socio-cultural constraints, proved to be insufficient for women to establish an enterprise productive enough to repay the loan and empower themselves. On the contrary, women have been significantly disempowered in the process of receiving and repaying loans. In Bangladesh, where the Grameen experiment was launched with much fanfare and showcased worldwide, with increased access to microloan, women have witnessed a growing demand of dowry and increased violence. Moreover, women become vulnerable to debt traps and poverty by engaging in microenterprises that almost always run below the minimum efficient scale. Many studies report that loans to women are appropriated by the men in the family, and women hardly had any control. Several studies have also shown that women's access to loan leads to decline in sexual and physical violence. The proponents of microfinance regard this decline in violence to be a significant step towards empowerment. There were also reports that loans from banks are often taken to offer dowry. Access to microloans without serious efforts to challenge gendered norms often lead to an increase in violence and facilitate practices which further subordination of women. Microenterprises set up by women did not have the potential for sustainable growth, could not generate enough income to repay loans, and was trapped in a circle of loans. In India, self-help groups came to be known as state help groups, where SHGs are linked to banks by government mandates and avail loans at a priority basis at low interest rate. But a huge proportion of SHG defaulted, adding to the non-performing assets of the banks. Very few SHGs were able to set up income-generating activities for the members. Fewer could sustain it in the long run. It was lack of skill that was identified as factors responsible. Now I come back to the growth of number of women entrepreneurs in India, and to talk about how women entrepreneurs, the enterprise, how the women enterprises are. This is based on a report from Niti Aayog, published in October 2022. But the data that has been used in the report is from the 6th economic census, which was held in 2013. The 7th economic census was to take place in 2019, but I do not have the data available to me. I don't know if these are actually available also. Data is a big problem in talking about women issues. If we look at the activity profiles of women entrepreneurs in India, 34.6% are based on agricultural activities, 65.7% in non-agricultural activities. Within the agricultural activities, livestock is the most prominent sector, and in non-agricultural activities, it is the manufacturing sector. And it is to be noted that in handloom and handicraft sector, women own 22% of the enterprises, or 22% of the enterprises have women entrepreneur. In the agricultural activities, after livestock, it is the forestry, then non-crop farming based activities, fisheries come next. And in non-agricultural activities, around 45% establishments are in manufacturing. Other activities are trading, education, and food and accommodation services. But then entrepreneurs are those who are expected not only to create employment for themselves, but also employment for others. If we look at the employment creation, we would see that 83% of enterprises are without any hired workers. In the agricultural activity-based enterprises, 92% of the enterprises, and in non-agricultural activities, 78% of the enterprises do not hire any worker. 21% employ at least one hired worker. At least non-agricultural activities have more potential to have hired workers, but we'll see in the next slide the status of women entrepreneurs across several characteristics. Yeah. The SAFE framework, where S stands for sustainability, A, autonomy, F, formal or informal, and E, employment generation. We say the business is resilient enough to recover from external shock. We'll call them sustainable enterprises. Post-COVID, 19.73% of the enterprises faced loss in revenue. Regarding autonomy, it is observed that 20% of the enterprises are run by their spouses. 95% of the enterprises are informal in nature, and in employment generation, it is 1.67 persons per enterprise. 95% of women proprietors run with less than 6 workers, most being own account or single person enterprises, and only 1.9% with 6 to 10 employees. And what is the support ecosystem for these enterprises? That is the schemes and programs of state and central government. The focus of all the central and state schemes skews exclusively towards 2 ecosystem needs. Around 45% of the central scheme provides support for access to finance, and 27% provides support in training and skilling. There is a support need in mentoring, networking, and marketing as expressed by women entrepreneurs themselves. Coming to skilling, the skill development has an objective to enhance employability, productivity, and economic benefit. And it has to be aligned to the need and demand of employers for a sustainable livelihood through organized training. Usually, skill development is looked upon as a strategy to enhance employability, productivity, and economic benefit. National Skill Development Mission Statement proclaims its aim to implement a set of policies which will align demand of the employers for a well-trained, skilled workforce with aspirations of Indian citizens for sustainable livelihood. It is an instrumental approach, utilitarian. Skills are understood as freely deployable assets acquired through organized training. Accused to be economistic and productivist, this approach overlooks and undervalues traditional artisanal forms of apprenticeship and disregards the culturally defined and socially embedded nature of skills. It is important to analyze the socially mediated nature of skill acquisition process to understand how social institutions like gender, caste, or age may constrain or enable skill development and the subsequent employment outcomes. It has been observed that often entrepreneurial skills depend on or related to gendered identity. Also, acquisition of skills, their utilization for better economic opportunities and upward mobility are mediated by social and power relations, as well as political economy of employment practices like flexible working hours, etc. Now I come to a case study. We have seen in an earlier slide where I say that the food and accommodation actually accounts for around more than 4% of the enterprises. Food and accommodation services is one of the sectors where more than 4% of women enterprises belong. Growing demand for food and beverage services. India's food and retail industry is 6th largest in the world and growing around 15% annually. Growth of home delivery business is a part of this surge in food industry. But there are other factors like demography, migration pattern, family structure, and gender relations, etc. We take up a case of women entrepreneurs who supply home cooked food in West Bengal. The demand for home cooked food, home delivery of home cooked food as distinct from commercially produced restaurant food caterers and takeaways in the context of fast growing food and retail industry. The demographic factors like elderly persons living alone, on their own, children working in other cities had led to the growth of urban care industry and organized provision of home help for health and other domestic services. Home cooked food available through such delivery services is required because there are in cities young people flocking for work and for studies and staying without family. The element of personal touch and person-to-person interactions are USP of such services. It is observed that while men operate with market-savvy commercial logic, women are motivated by an ethic of personalized care and family ethos of involvement in the customer's everyday domestic life. They cast themselves as expert practitioners of an inherited culinary tradition, as well as being skilled in exercising a superior and inherent gender capacity to forge emotional, nurturing kinship bonds with the customers. Although this reproduces gender distinctions and may constrain the growth of women business, they nevertheless cultivate the skills as powerful mode of self-realization and developing a sense of self-worth. This takes us to the woman entrepreneur. As opposed to quintessentially Schumpeterian entrepreneur innovator, who is a heroic male figure operating with an economic rationality linked with the drive for profit and competitiveness. This, as opposed to the idea of entrepreneur, this idea of the entrepreneur is associated with daring, risk-taking, decisive leadership, new knowledge, a break with the past and tradition and creative destruction of the old. From this perspective, women enterprise and skills are often seen as lacking in ambition and in willingness to break new ground, to grow their business beyond the subsistence needs. Actually, family responsibility rather than profitability or business expansion is clearly the overwhelming motivation and incentive for the women entrepreneurs, like those in the home delivery ventures. Development interventions to promote entrepreneurial skills and stimulate innovations are frequently designed to rectify these supposed gender deficiencies. There are many examples of women setting up enterprises out of sheer necessity, and some of them flourishing into a viable enterprise with large number of clients and employing many people. Post-COVID, a new business model has emerged, which is called business without investment. Established business firms offer those without work to resell their products online, help them with photographs, etc. Additionally, the online platforms, social media opened up new possibilities. Digital competence, innovative product design, communication skills are the skills those required. Finally, the way forward to make gainful employment possible for most of our women, burden of unpaid care needs to be eased. They should be trained to take advantage of emerging opportunities. Digital competence need to be imparted. Skilling and training should take into consideration the culturally embedded nature and must be followed by mentoring and marketing supports. Overall, definite decisive steps must be taken to reduce gender-based violence so that women become free to follow their own career paths. Thanks. I end here.
Professor Paramita, thank you so much. It was a very comprehensive, factual presentation from your side. We saw the perspective of women's employment before COVID and after COVID also. In fact, from the participant side also, we have a lot of appreciation for the presentation and for your views that you have put forth. One thing that is coming to my mind is when we talk about the diversity of India, we cannot generalize some things in terms of women or employment or anything that we talk about all over the India. So can you also throw some light on what is the difference in the scenario of employment of women in the northeastern part of India compared to the other parts of India? Is it very different, or is it quite similar? Because some of the participants also here have suggested that in the northeastern side of India, the women entrepreneurs are much more active than the other parts of India. Is it true?
Yes, they are. But then the nature of the enterprise still remains, one person oriented like things, self-employment. In that count, this is not very different.
And what probably can be the reason behind that? That the ladies there are more active than the other parts of the country?
So that is what I was mentioning, that the socio-cultural, these things are, there is no universal policies that can be, cloak that can be implemented. Each area, each community, each state has their own socio-cultural background, which needs to be taken into, which needs to be considered in imparting skills and in design of the policies also. It cannot be an umbrella policy for everyone to be effective. Yeah.
Paramita, I think she wants to.
Dr. Paramita, thank you so much for that. For that interesting discussion. Your presentation was absolutely very different and engaging. I would like to ask you one thing. Taking on from what Dr. Shalki had asked, you said that it is the same thing that each state has its own composition. So I would just like to inquire, is it because the share of tribal women as a part of the society of Northeast, are they more empowered because of their society as such, and they go for much of self-employment? That self-employment, as you said, number of self-employed women are much more than working in some other organization.
I do not have the exact statistics.
Safety and safety of women, I think Northeastern states are much more better as it is. Northeastern states are they have come a long way since what they were once. And Tripura, particularly.
No. It's not coming a long way. Traditionally, the Northeastern states, the tribal communities, there's a very open type of community where you don't see much of violence against women.
Yes.
It's a much more equal sort of, because both male and female it's a very difficult conditions of life where they both have to work together to make things, make ends meet. So it's not coming of a long way, but what is happening now is with the interactions with the other communities, all the vices are also getting into these areas also. That's the thing.
Yes, but I think that vices are also coming alongside, but I find that yes, it's an open society and much more peaceful, I think, than in Northeast. Tripura, in terms of women safety.
The crime record, the NCRB report doesn't say so. Dowry and all those are. If you look into the crime records, I don't have it with me. It's one of a lot of dowry deaths and all those are there.
Dowry deaths, which doesn't. As a commoner, you don't see such things. Right, you will be having better statistics about that. Dowry deaths, if you say, which is very low in other parts, in eastern part of India.
Yeah.
So, what is your suggestion, ma'am, for empowering women through gainful employment? How do you suggest? Post-pandemic, you said yes, doors have opened. Now they are
yes.
It is not just Northeast, everywhere.
Everywhere, right? I am not talking about Northeast. All my statistics related to all India level. Yes, I didn't go into the divisions of different regions. It has opened up, and one has to take the opportunity. And there is this digital literacy have to be, and the women need to be trained. Actually, there should be a felt need among women to engage and to explore these possibilities.
Right. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
Another thing, ma'am, that comes in my mind is in some parts of India and probably in other parts of the world also, we have some of the platforms that we give to the ladies to become an entrepreneur. Like if they are
Yes.
good in crafts or if they are good in cooking something, there
Yes,
are
yes,
some agencies which give them some platforms.
yes.
Would you like to throw some light on that?
Yes, I was just in my last slides, I have talked about that, wherein platforms were created and many individuals who have lost jobs in the pandemic, and those who were not doing anything during the pandemic, they showcased their products and built up a clientele and earning income.
Mhm.
This is now they are saying this is sort of like zero investment business. You don't need much investment for this if you have you know how to use the platforms. Those who are creating the platforms are the entrepreneurs, I would say. They host many other entrepreneurs. And there are evidences where these small businesses have grown and they are creating employment for many others, particularly in apparel businesses.
On similar lines, one of our participants had asked one question. Can you please shed some light on zero investment business online? And she also suggested that it seems that photography and product selling online still needs some investment to start business, even though it is an online business.
No, zero investment. I was saying this was like a dramatizing things, but very little investment you would need. And in investment, you don't need an investment in one go. You can build up on your investment. You can start small and then grow up. So this opportunity is a very big opportunity compared to the kind of investment we'll need if we have a set business establishment and on a premise. That is what I meant.
Madam, could you please unshare the slides so that we can see?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Stop sharing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. I did. Yeah.
Thank
The
you, ma'am.
Is it
question,
okay?
there is a question by Kokila Meena.
Yes.
Year by year, household income is declining. No doubt higher education level is increasing, but the household income is declining.
I think this is in relation to the reasons that I have said regarding the declining labor force participation of women. This increasing income and declining labor force participation reasoning was not by me. It was in the 2019 economic survey, which was said this is the thing that, and there were the opposing views also. I presented both the views.
NSS.
And ma'am, there is a request by our participants if you could share the presentation in the chat box so that everybody can have the access of the presentation.
Okay, I will try to do that. What if I send it to you?
Yeah, you can send
They
it
have
to me.
written their email. Yeah, they have written Binoy Debabrata. He has written his email also in the chat box.
Okay, I'll try to send.
You can send it to any one of us also. We can send it.
Okay. Bina, no?
Binoy Mentor. Then Sandhya Udati. Now I think many will write. So I think better you send to the organizer.
Yes, I'll do that.
Yes, Dr. Kalpana has also asked for. There are many who are asking for it.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Presentation and thank you for your time.
Oh, data has come.
Meanwhile,
I'm
ma'am.
muting my audio.
Sure. Meanwhile, ma'am is sharing the presentation. We'll move forward with the second session of the third day. The second session is about accelerating equality and empowerment through financial inclusion of women. And ladies and gentlemen, we have Dr. Tara Nair, Director Research, Workfare and Free Foundation, Ajivika Bureau, Bangalore, India. I'd like to introduce ma'am. Dr. Tara Nair is director at the Workfare and Free Foundation Ajivika Bureau, Bangalore. She was a professor at the Gujarat Institute of Development Research, Ahmedabad till recently. A researcher and teacher for close to 30 years, Dr. Nair's research mainly relates to small and microfinance, social economics of fisheries, feminist development policies, transdisciplinary approaches to labor and migration studies, feminist presses. She has published widely on these themes, which include the following books: Microfinance India State of Sector Report 2013 in Sage Publications, Inclusive Finance India Report 2014 from Oxford University Press, and Microfinance in India Approaches, Outcome, Challenges in Routledge Publication. She has been a visiting scholar at the Foundation of Human Sciences, Paris, France, Media Management and Transformation Center, John Copping International Business School, John Copping University, Sweden, and College of Media, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, USA. We welcome you, ma'am. Over to you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you so much, Dr. Manas. I think before I share my presentation, I must really thank Amity University, Professor Banerjee, and Professor Vibhuti Patel. I was wondering who must be responsible for referring me to you, and I guessed it must be Professor Patel. And thank you. And, thank you so much. And I thought this was an absolutely wonderful sort of an kind of an event, in the sense that you have sort of gathered multiple themes around empowerment and women, and try to sort of I'm sure by now you would have seen the connections between all these issues, and by the time the the workshop ends, you would see how interconnected and complex some of these issues are, and how difficult then to sort of really uncover them through events like this. So I've been asked to talk about financial inclusion and women. And I must actually say that what Professor Paramita Saha presented, a large part of that, my presentation would resonate. I am really drawing, upon last 25 years of my sort of very close association with the development finance field. As a researcher, and actually for a short time as even a practitioner. I was heading a research of Friends of Women's World Banking for 2 years, when I had quite a sort of a hands-on sort of relationship with the organizations which were dispensing with microfinance in this country. And I also my presentation would also reflect a kind of philosophical transition that I personally have gone through, traveling closely with microfinance and financial inclusion, what is known as small finance and things like that, and why I think so, and how I connect that philosophical transition with rather larger broad trends in the environment, in the macroeconomic environment globally. And also the kind of interconnections I have started seeing a few years back between finance and other things, especially labor. So I am actually trying to explain a broad trend in capitalist development called financialization, and trying to see the connections between financialization. And I'm even sort of positing that financial inclusion is nothing but an expression of financialization. It is, I perhaps rather look at financial inclusion with a rather doubtful eye. It is not inclusion the way perhaps we understand sociologically, but it is more in terms of a kind of a mechanical integration of different segments of sort of population, underbanked population, to the financial market. So that's how I really sort of interpreted financial inclusion in this presentation. And I think microfinance perhaps really, and as Dr. Paramita Saha very eloquently sort of described, some of the sort of larger learnings that we have had from multiple sort of, practice fields of microfinance. So I will perhaps draw on some of those elements. I will also draw upon a longitudinal study that I have done, the cities of India. 2 cities of India, I largely referred to. One is Ahmedabad, other is Bhubaneswar from Orissa. 2 other locations, we looked at Chennai and Wardha, which is not a town in that sense, more of, a semi-rural sort of an area. I'm not referring to that, but I would rather focus my attention on. So these are going to be the kind of material on which I have sort of, I have really crafted a presentation for your benefit. So I'll share my presentation now. Yeah, I hope you can see this. All right, let me just minimize this. Yeah. Okay. I have sort of titled the presentation, Financialized Development, Household Indebtedness, and Women's Empowerment, Reflections from India. Reflections because, I randomly sort of drew on the kind of maybe my own writings and some of the data available and the insights that I have sort of derived from, insights and inferences that I have derived from the field research that I have had over these years. I think there is absolutely no sort of a confusion when somebody says that access to finance is a very critical entitlement for anyone, irrespective of caste, class, gender, any other kind of sort of social identity, to exercise agency and control over life's choices. And in that sense, access to finance is very empowering. We generally link finance to development through this route also at the level of the individual. So we know that in the earlier sort of decades of, maybe when we were restoring and redoing the post-World War sort of a world, generally, financial flows or flows of financial resources to this kind of disadvantaged households in whichever way, maybe they have gone through certain kind of social transformations or economic distresses or whatever. But that kind of financial transfers were predominantly thought of as either state transfers, the state themselves are trying to transfer a part of, the resources that it has, it has at its disposal. Of course, the logic was redistributive justice and or through bank loans. Banks are this humongous financial institutions. At that point in time, many of the banks were actually in the private sector, very unlike now, but still they were the custodians of finance and, financial instruments and things like that. So these were the 2 predominant institutions which used to facilitate, mediate the flow of sort of finances. 1970s and 80s, it's one of the reasons why in less developed countries like India, people of my generation would remember a host of schemes and programs came up in countries like India, which combine bank debt and government subsidy. IRDP is the classic example. It's the largest rural development program any country has ever implemented in the world till then. So that was that really sort of, experimented with a kind of an approach where bank debt was sort of, combined with government subsidy to certain sections of households, at certain targeted households, generally recognized as poor. So we should also remember that before 1970s, 1960s, 70s, extremely important in the history of Indian banking, because that's the phase when social banking in India has, India started. As I told you, till the time private interests sort of, controlled banking business by kind of in about mid-1960s, largely for political reasons and to somewhat for developmental reasons. Indian state at that point in time thought it is extremely important to nationalize banking resources so that conventionally, unaccessed segments like the rural sector, because banking operations were largely confined to industry and in urban areas. So if you really need to broad-base banking, then we need to really nationalize. And of course, I think you should, many of you would have read the debates around nationalization, the first wave of India's banking nationalization, which was also hugely political at that point in time. It coincided with Green Revolution because even Green Revolution success needed access to resources by small farmers. So a lot of factors came together to create a political situation where banks were nationalized. So when these, subsequently when these kind of subsidy debt programs were, they're called credit subsidy programs, when they were introduced, the banks were at the control of the government. So the state could actually sort of, direct banks that you should lend to these kind of segments, these targets of population, which again led to huge debates. If you look at the banking development in kind of debate in India, we know that the banks were not very happy with that. Certain credit inquiry committees were extremely scathing in their criticisms to say that this has actually sort of vitiated the, banking kind of, banking morale in India. The banks were sort of, made to play a kind of a very subordinate role in the hands of the state and things like that. So all this were happening at the background. The states and the financial institutions relationship was also sort of, evolving, changing under different political dispensation, political ideological persuasions, and things like that. But in the 90s and 70s, it was easy for the state to direct banks to say that you must support these targeted households with credit and subsidy. Again, you must have read a lot of evaluation studies on IRDP and those kinds of credit subsidy programs. Mixed results, it has not really. The idea was to actually create entrepreneurs out of, poor people. It did not happen because, as Professor Paramita Saha very kind of, very clearly sort of talked about, credit is just one input in the set of inputs that a potential entrepreneur needs. So by making cheap credit, it's not very easy to create entrepreneurs. So, NPAs surged, people were not returning the money that they borrowed, banks pushed those targets, a lot of things happened by 1990s. Anyway, India was really getting into a complete redefinition of its economic logic. So it wanted to really get into a more market-oriented, private sector-oriented sort of a development model, largely sort of, described as neoliberal kind of development sort of a paradigm. If you really look at it, this relationship, between people who really do not have, financial means, people who are not, people who are excluded from credit and financial resources, were also, systematically sort of, separated from the banking, mainstream banking scenario. So by mid-1980s, you really start seeing the advent of a kind of an approach, which was trying to replace all these approaches where the state was taking a direct role in mediating some of these financial flows, cheap financial, affordable financial flows, which kind of, replaced them with approaches that shifted financial responsibility to individuals. I think Professor Paramita mentioned that as an element, the individual kind of, being made to bear the responsibility of financial sort of their financial behavior and life. And along with that, we also see that the state is slowly, through appropriate instruments and social innovations, trying to encourage poor households, especially poor women, to seek support from informal arrangements. So I look at SHGs as a significant social innovation, which was trying to kind of, push the responsibility to informal arrangements other than formal arrangements, and making banks a kind of, a support structure. So the banks are not really kind of, though there are targets fixed and all that, but no bank was really pushed to the margin saying that you must support, some of these groups and things like that. And we also see that though SHG movement, became very prominent by, very widespread by 1996, 95, 96. In fact, a lot of support, promotional support given to SHGs was also withdrawn. So in some of the backward areas, disadvantaged regions in India, SHGs were created, but there was nobody to really promote them, nobody responsible to capacitate them and things like that. But by the time the financial inclusion, though the term was not financial inclusion then, but there was a very clear understanding that if poorer households need to be serviced, then they to be part of some such arrangement. Banks are not really responsible to really sort of serve them directly. If it comes to that, they may do that, but they could also take a very safe stand that we will support women because they are very credit worthy. We can depend on them. They will not fight with us. They will also perhaps repay money as per experience, but we are not going to really approach this. We are not going to really reach out to poorer households by any other means. So we started celebrating this model as a model of, an interesting model wherein we will be able to tackle the issue of poverty, etc., etc. And very unproblematically, we have really accepted, we have sort of subscribed to a new discourse of pro-poor development, which had microfinance at the center of its of that discourse. I'm not really getting into the story of microfinance because I think a lot very complex and very diverse kind of stories. But even let me also tell you, even the most committed feminist organizations were lured by SHGs, the model of SHGs, because unfortunately there was nothing else in the social organizational sphere. So we should also see the evolution of a feminist movement in the 80s, 90s, etc. So the feminist movement tried to resist this kind of an onslaught of financial logic. But I must tell you that since I work very closely with feminist organizations, some of the organizations, or a large number of organizations, including some of the very quite progressive organizations, thought that they would be able to reform this, this model and use it for their own purposes. So many organizations, including political organizations, adapted this kind of a financing model as a model of, reaching out to poor households. This is the time we see that states like Andhra Pradesh or states like Kerala, for instance, creating large microfinance-based models for poverty alleviation and decentralized governance. So there was definitely a widespread acceptance of using finance as the kind of a lever for achieving pro-poor development. So I actually now would like to bring in this, this theoretical understanding of financialization. A kind of a process of development which we did not notice, until very recently. How the finance capital, I think, when the contemporary capitalism has assumed very significant and very explicit forms of a financial capitalism, we have started noticing that, okay, finance has definitely sort of risen to the position of the most dominant, site of action in the world. And there was something else happening, which was sort of, which means that the world of finance has already started overshadowing and overpowering other fields of production. Even creating a situation wherein there was a very clear sort of a distance between the productive sector and the finance sector. And the productive, because we know that there is a very important debate in India, for instance, the decline of manufacturing in India. We know that the real production sector in India and elsewhere has not been doing very well. We talk about jobless growth, and we talk about the sector is not growing enough, and we talk about value added not growing in manufacturing compared to services and other sectors. So something very deep rooted has been happening in the real production sector, whereas the finance sector has been growing. Growing quite impressively, in all spheres. So internationally, at the global level, we have started seeing an extraordinary presence of institutionalized finance in almost everyday life of people. In fact, there is a situation where an ordinary person, an ordinary individual in the world is made to live by the dictum of finance. Like we are on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, we are interacting with the world of finance in multiple ways. We have insurance, we have pension, we have other kinds of investments. We are even dealing with our own institutions through the mode of finance. So finance is everywhere, because you perhaps would not see the state so much, but you see a lot of financial institutions around you as far as playing a very significant role in your life. And that's exactly financialization talks about. Financialization talks about a phenomenon wherein ordinary lives are influenced by financial institutions, technologies, financial instruments, financial logic, and finance in general. So, theoretically, it is understood as a macro phenomenon. And we still say that financialization is only relevant for developed, capitalist countries like maybe the Western European and the North American sort of situation. But my argument is that through the current data, through the available data that we can generate from the mainstream banking development in India, we may be able to see how financialization works in India. My purpose in the later part of the presentation would be to link how this financialization is also something which aids what we understand as financial inclusion, or how these two are very, very related sort of movements, though we look at financial inclusion as a very empowering sort of a process. So these are the main aspects of financialization. If you review the literature on financialization, it says that financialization is manifest in these many ways. One is ascendance of finance capital and the emergence of a very nested financial architecture, because financial sector is getting deregulated progressively since the 1970s. You also see that as part of financialization, or as a manifestation of financialization, finance has risen to become an autonomous business activity. So finance is an activity which generates business, which generates profit. Earlier, actually, profit was related to production, and real sector. Now, finance itself has risen to an autonomous business activity, and it has become increasingly attractive as a destination of investment. So many of the real production, firms, large corporates, also have an associated finance business arm now, which helps them not only in terms of tapping into, but also in terms of creating a different profit center, which comes from the finance, so the business of finance. So you see a humongous rise in, surge in innovations in the finance sphere, using the current technological advances and things like that in structuring financial products and bringing out more sort of financial sort of products. You talk about blending finance. We should bringing organizations together so that they all can chip in to create kind of complex financial products. We know of securitization as a financial product. We talk about structured financial products. So the financial innovation is one of the most exciting sort of spheres in the world, and even in India. If you look at the finance industry's growth, you will realize that. The other manifestation of financialization is the the kind of a increased emphasis on financial value maximization of businesses, because the shareholders' financial investment becomes, a very important concern. So businesses are run so that they can give maximum value to the capital invested by shareholders. So you know that when boardrooms are going to discuss value maximization for shareholders, those boardrooms are going to be governed very directly, or they are going to be they are going to come out with strategies which are very different from, maximizing production, or, like creating jobs, or, creating sort of more employment opportunities, nothing of that sort. The idea is to create more value for shareholders. And if it involves bringing in platforms, we will do that. If it involves artificial intelligence, we will do that. And if it really wants to cut employment, we will do that too. So finance is actually directing, our employment strategies, our production strategies, everything. Even I think it's very important now, to look at the rise of this kind of platform economy and financialization, which is an unexplored area to a large extent. Technology-driven industries in finance, connection between technology, finance, and industry. These are really emerging areas of deeper sort of inquiries. All this affected something like even microfinance. Microfinance board structure changed from 2000s. Before that, microfinance industry was really dominated by nonprofits, who are sort of, vouching by the welfare of people, poverty reduction, poor people, serving the most excluded and all that. But 2000 onwards, microfinance started becoming NBFCs, started attracting foreign investment, equity investment, portfolio investment, different kinds of debt investment sort of flows. They actually start their board structure board structures changed, and those boards were dominated by dominant finance players globally, and their strategies also changed. You also see that, they started dismantling SHGs, groups, they started thinking about individual lending, they started thinking about, using more technology to serve, the poor, like borrowers. They even started thinking of actually moving away from women if it suits their profit agenda. So all this, was really happening. And my argument is that if you look at them as independent sort of a trends, you see one thing. If you look at them as a trend which was forced upon the microfinance or financial sector in general by the agenda of financialization, then we start seeing the connection between finance, labor, other markets and things like that. And, financialization also means that banks become increasingly disinclined to lend to non-financial businesses. Banks are not interested in supporting small manufacturing enterprises. Like we know that, micro enterprises of the nature that Paramita Saha was talking about will not get, in spite of Mudra scheme and things like that, they are not able to get credit from the marketplace because the banks are not interested. If you really go as a small entrepreneur, go to the market and, have a negotiation with a public sector bank in India, you will not get a loan below 17-18% per month. So that's a very unviable situation because the banks' interest rates are deregulated. They are not really mandated to lend to you. So if it's not served them, they're not going to lend to you. So non-financial businesses like manufacturing, small enterprises in other sectors, etc., are not going to get the same kind of patronage from banks as we were getting maybe in the 1970s, 80s, and things like that. The other, at the household level, the most important manifestation is that increasing indebtedness of households. Poor households, middle class households. Even if you look at it, even share to banking institutions is changing. Actually, it's increasing. Because through education loans, through personal loans, maybe we have been earlier, borrowing for housing or other durable assets. Now we are borrowing from banks to buy a computer or a washing machine or, any such, thing. Banks are willing to lend you, provided you are willing to pay 17-18% interest rate for those loans. But indebtedness of households has definitely increased. The last point is actually financialization of social policies. So this kind of financialization of tendencies has not only affected the production sector, it has also impacted the social sector, the social policies. Your social security is no longer guaranteed. You do not have PF. You're not going to get a pension facility from the state. You have to really depend on the market for all this. I get a pension if I invest my savings in a pension fund. Or if I'm a farmer, if I take an agricultural insurance policy, my crops are protected. The state is definitely not interested or committed to that. If I am liable to fall sick, I better get a health insurance policy from a private player. So social policies, which we thought were commitment of states, because that's a commitment of the state towards a citizen, they also have become hugely financialized. Again, these are all smooth transitions. We all became part of the game, because there is no other way. There's a kind of a network effect, working in the society. If I work for 30 years, I don't have a pension. So when I realized that I need to, I'm not really, my institution is not covered by, normal pension. It became my responsibility to start investing my hard-earned money in some sort of a pension fund, so that my old age is secured. And that is true of many who really started working in these kinds of institutions in the 2000s. So I think this is again a manifestation of what financialization has done to the world of the everyday transactions that we are all engaging in. I think if you really look at the literature on financialization, etc., you will find that a lot of disciplines have contributed to it, not only economics. There are sociologists who have done wonderful pieces on it. Geography, geographers have done excellent research on that and all that. So though our dominant understanding is still of an economistic understanding, but people have, since 1990s have been contributing to this interesting debate. I think in that slide, I was trying to say that, like in the case of India, generally I hear this argument that, you are actually overshooting. Yahan financialization kuch nahi hai. There's no financialization in India. But what I'm trying to say is that if you really very closely look at the data, normal banking data, you can really delineate certain interesting trends, which can really take us to, an argument that actually India is also no different in this aspect. So that's the data that I was trying to present here. Some indicators I try to present in front of you. I was just looking at the data between 2008 and 2020. 21 and 22 are some ways abnormal years. In the financial business sphere, you don't see that kind of abnormality much, but still I did not consider them. If you look at agriculture lending, we see that lending to agriculture grew at 7%, bank lending to agriculture in India. But if you look at the lending that banks have done to non-banking finance companies, which are supposed to be shadow banks, they're not full-fledged banks, they are private owned financial institutions. They're not full-fledged banking intermediaries. Some functions they do, some functions they don't really do. Till recently, they also had a fairly mired history, but now they are growing at a very, very fast pace. Their lending, the bank lending to, the NBFC lending percentage, agar aap dekhen, the kind of growth rate, if you see, they have been able to grow their lending by 20%. So when bank lending to agriculture just grew by 20%, NBFC lending was growing at 20% during, that, and that's compounded growth. If I really, again, if I really extend slightly, take it back, kind of take it forward to 2015, because 2011, etc., we 11 to 14, 15, we have been talking about financial inclusion as a structured government program with a, with a very definite goal of increasing access to banking, etc. Even during that period, if you look at the agricultural lending, it's only 7%. But banks were lending to NBFCs, at 17% growth. Most of the banks were lending to NBFCs rather than to productive sectors like industry and agriculture, because industrial lending grew only by 1.5%. So hardly any lending was happening, in the case of Indian industry, but non-banking financial intermediaries, which were not full-fledged banks, which are private owned, which are shadow banks, were able to grow their intake from banking institutions in India by about 17%. Another indicator we can look at it is perhaps industrial lending to personal loans. Last 2-3 years, maybe the initial years of the 2010s, you see that industry lending was slightly compounded growth rate of about 10% or so. Even then, personal loans were increasing by 13%. So within the banking, banks were interested in lending to financial businesses, which are private owned. Banks were interested in lending more to personal loans, which are high, high interest bearing, and also individual centric, and promoting consumption in the economy, which has, I think you should also think about other connections. Those kinds of lendings can lead to credit card consumption increases alongside. People are actually taking more and more of private and public bank given credit cards and stuff like that. So overall consumption is increasing in the economy, certain kinds of consumption, but productive sectors in the economy are not able to get enough resources from the banks. So I would say that growth in this kind of non-productive or or financial businesses, and non-productive loans. Non-productive, of course, somebody can argue that this can also be productive, but I am using it in a very a sterile sense. Non-productive loans and growth in shadow banks, these are important indicators that in India financialization has actually been taking place. The other critical indicator that I would say is the increase in household debt, especially household debt of poor households, where the women in the household bear a disproportionate burden of borrowing and repayment. And I am actually drawing upon some of the results of the study, a multi-state study that we have done in 17-18, a very quasi-anthropological design. We had 8 months of constant interaction with the same households. In Ahmedabad city, we also did Gujarat rural. I'm not presenting it here. And in Bhubaneswar, again the city of Bhubaneswar. There we have actually taken urban, a peri-urban, and a slightly rural area. But I'm only talking about the urban comparison right now. So if I summarize the results of this extended, very intensive field-oriented study that we have done, where we have compared household budgets of I think all put together about 200 households. If I take cities together, about 150 households over a period of 8 months through routine checking, and in certain cases also using diaries, financial diaries at the household level. These are some of the following are some of the findings that we will be able to report. Number one, women are permanently trapped in the loan circuit of shadow banking entities, mostly microfinance NBFCs, and increasingly other types of non-banking companies, like other loan companies like vehicle finance, other kinds of asset financing companies and all that. So the indebtedness is actually by women because they are the ones who actually take the loan, are responsible for repayment. And many of these other kind of non-finance kind of, non-banking companies are the ones which sell kind of, coupled products, financial products along with consumption goods. For instance, if you get into the slums of the kind of poor neighborhoods of many of the states, you can see that people have taken a loan, got a mobile phone along with that, not as a free gift. They are paying interest on that, but it looks as if it's a kind of merit good for them, or a refrigerator, or if you in very poorer settings, you may even find a pressure cooker getting attached to a loan as another supplementary loan. Solar instruments, irrespective of whether they use it or not, solar lamps and solar cookers and solar torches and all kinds of things. If we look at the loan portfolio of these households, in Ahmedabad, about 54% of the new loans that we noticed during the field survey time, about 54% belong to NBFCs, in MFI NBFCs. And in Bhubaneswar, 75% of the new loans were actually coming from MFIs. And all these loans are in women's name. And if you look at the total outstanding loans of the households that we are talking about, it's almost half of it. Some of the loans come from the state as part of state schemes. If they have younger kind of people, they must have taken a housing loan. So as the household loan portfolio, some of them would reflect, but MFI loans still would account for about half of the loans that they have availed, during the survey time. If you really look at bank linkage, which is a great indicator for many of these inclusion studies, are people linked to banks or not, you see that in Ahmedabad, 87% of individual members of the households that we escorted through this period were bank linked, and that was little less, about 70% in Bhubaneswar. They all had, technically speaking, bank accounts. Many of them were, Jan Dhan accounts. Or in the 2011 drive, many of them opened their accounts. It's essentially financial inclusion accounts. And accounts were largely owned by women. Actually, the proportion of men who did not have a bank account, was more than the women who did not have a bank account. So that financial inclusion drive was also very focusedly targeting women to that was again a target-driven program. So they were the targets, intended targets, and the target is reached by banks and other institutions. As I told you, 2006 came, after 2006, many of these accounts were opened as part of different drives of financial inclusion. Different versions of financial inclusion came into came to be practiced since 2006. What we saw in 2014-15 as Jan Dhan Yojana was just in kind of slightly reformed and a more broad-based program of action, which actually started in 2006. But we found that very interestingly, many of these accounts were used to receive certain kinds of government transfers. For instance, Ujjwala, gas kind of subsidy. Or if you have a kind of, student who is eligible for a scholarship in the house, those scholarship used to come to those accounts. Or old age pensions used to come to those accounts. So there is no financial transactions through accounts. Those accounts actually, in very kind of clever and effective way, kind of combined the subsidy transfer drive, which was happening by the side using digital technology. By 2014-15, we know that benefit transfer was predominantly technology mediated and through bank accounts. So many of these bank accounts were actually serving as the kind of a, conduit for that transfer. So there is a marriage of government's benefit transfer drive and financial inclusion, you do not see people receiving loans and people receiving huge amounts of savings and actively integrating themselves with the financial market, nothing of that sort. Interestingly, informal sources were still a very, very important part of the women in these areas. They were still pledging their ornaments. They were still sort of getting advances from employers. They were still kind of, getting into extremely, extremely precarious activities as part of, some shadowy value chains and getting some sort of a credit assistance from, traders and commission agents and things like that. So any possible informal means available, the women were actually taking recourse to. And as we explain later, very often to repay the loans taken from microfinance institutions, because microfinance institutions are more disciplined loans, they need to be repaid on time. The loan officer is going to be at a doorstep on a speculated day, at a speculated time. You must have, the installment ready, and, taking advantage of that sort of an understanding in Ahmedabad, large number of loan companies started really giving weekly money lending kind of loans to women. So I can give you an example. In one of the neighborhood, when we were actually having a group discussion, talking to people, I saw an agent walking in with a small little bag, a fat bag into the next household. I just rushed to him and find out, where is he a microfinance agent or what is he? He is actually my micro lenders agent. He runs a similar group with 10 members. Some of them are closer to kind of similar to the microfinance kind of group women. And his approach is very simple. Every Saturday, 10,000 rupees he offers. Anybody can take it, because through the next week, you have to repay your loan installments. And loan installments can go up to about 26,000 rupees a month. Because if you have borrowed from multiple sources and things like that. So here is a convenient plug-in agent who will give you pure, credit, money lender's credit, in order to help you to service your microfinance. So that's the kind of, the web of, indebtedness many of these households have actually got deeply sort of entrapped in. And of course, we need to see this kind of a mounting sort of debt at the background of fluctuating incomes. So when the debt is increasing, the sources are, many organizations are extremely happy to make you their client and lend to you, provided you give back the kind of installment on time. Your incomes are not increasing and your incomes are actually fluctuating widely. In our kind of study, we found that at the end of the period of our field interactions, 8 months in Ahmedabad, the average monthly income of a household was just about 20,000 rupees, but the average debt was about 130,000 rupees. So that's the debt service burden a household of 20,000 rupees really had. And we found that every household was engaged in at least 3 activities. Each activity can earn maybe about 5,000, 6,000 rupees. So, how did you manage then these fluctuating incomes and increasing debt wala scenario? We found that, different household members, especially women, are constantly getting in and out of labor market. I think we were talking about declining labor market participation of women. We are not seeing much of what is happening in the case of, we really do not know how women participate in labor market. What is the mode of women's participation in labor market, so that we are not even able to record, that work. So what is women's work in a poor neighborhood is something which, and I, as someone who is working full-time on labor and migration now, I can, perhaps give you a lot more examples as to how this, this sort of phenomenon is unfolding in India. And as they enter into multiple sort of, multiple times, multiple modes, they engage with the labor market. Each subsequent engagement, we find that their terms of engagement is actually deteriorating. Wage rate is going down because they're actually working on piece rate most of the time. Work hours are inflexibly increasing very often. Like absolutely no social security in this kind of work. They have to really take care of their accidents, smaller injuries, all kinds of, possibilities of, exposing themselves to accidents and those kinds of things. So all those, conditions are progressively and systematically deteriorating in the situation of work. This is just an illustration of one case where I just want to tell you between March 2016 and July 2018, how many loans a house of about, 5 members have incurred, with fairly, kind of systematic gap, 30, 50, 30, 20, 25, 40, 57 lakh. So I think you see, look at the Sources Microfinance Institution, private company. Many of the microfinance loans are repeat loans from the same organization, supplementary loans, etc., etc. So this is the reality, lived reality of a typical indebted household in a low economy neighborhood. This is another example, just a demonstration how, in about 8-9 months, situation has actually changed. So if I really try to look at, the previous presentation, gainful employment, and what I'm supposed to talk about, financial inclusion, I see very clear connections between finance and labor. The strategies of financial engagement of households and the labor strategies that the households follow. In fact, women are compelled to accept any work that adds some income to the household finance. Like in our sample, almost all the women that we have we have followed up through these months, they are involved in some precarious income generation activity. Why I say precarious, these are activities which do not involve any skill. They are sort of, connecting bulbs, or they are kind of putting beads together, or they're creating some sort of artificial flowers, or, they're creating certain party material, all kinds of completely immaterial sort of a work, inconspicuous work. Low skill, low and uncertain wages, insecurity of employment, and lack of social entitlements. Through the day, an average woman is engaging in multiple activities. And they simultaneously engage with multiple work arrangements. They work at different times. Certain work is taken care of in the evening, some when the children are away. The different wage rates are offered to these works. They have to really deal with multiple networks, because traders, commission agents, other kinds of sub-agents, their peer group, all this is different. And the work conditions are different. Productivity norms are different and things like that. So the other element was that, average monthly earnings of women, much less than, in spite of all this, if you look at the average monthly earnings of an individual woman, it was much less than what men earned, about 2,000 rupees. Whereas, a man who is can transport transport operator, or a shop shop owner, or a factory worker, or a diamond polisher, except they were earning an average about 10,000 rupees or so. And of course, I mentioned about demonetization GST because, immediate aftermath of that, we entered certain pockets, and women garment workers were actually working half the time because there was no work, and half the income, or a little less than half their income. So continuous engagement with precarious kind of a work, what does it imply for women? It actually blurs their perception of their own labor. So it's very difficult to collectivize, conscientize, tell women that, what you're going through, you should raise your voice for, better wages, etc. It doesn't really work because, they are so hazy about what they do. They consider their work as inferior. They consider their work as supplementary. They think it's a very transient kind of a work which keeps changing, and that work is slowly valued. So it has a lot of implication for self-worth and what we call as empowerment, or sense of agency. So getting money in hand and feeling a sense of value as a worker or a contributor are two different things. And of course, how do we earn this money? Much of this money, I think, as I explained to you, much of the money was actually going in repayment or some household needs and things like that. So these are some of the, I'm just sort of wanting to tell you then, these are some of the kind of activities they do, the informal and insecure activities they do. They make party streamers, they make decoration material. Some of them make chunneries for gods and goddesses, little chunnery pieces, brand tags, like a big, ready-made companies would approach them to tie the band, a brand tags tie karne ke liye, which will go to the garments at the end of it. So they make about 200, 300 pieces, get paid about 100 to 225 rupees on days when they work. They're actually getting about 1 to 3 rupee piece rate. That's what they earn if they do any of these work. If you can see that brand tags, 1,000 brand tags, if they do that, they get 2 rupee 25 paise a day. So which means you have to, thousands of tags need to be tied so that they can make some 50, 60 rupees a day. And children are involved very often because, it's not possible to kind of finish targets on time and things like that. So this brings me to, I hope I have not taken so much of time. I'll just wind up in 5 minutes. I'm extremely sorry. All this, observations really take me to certain concerns. One is, there is a lack of appreciation in the current scholarship of the links between finance and labor market changes in the labor market, structural changes in the labor market. We look at casualization, voluntarization of work, or we now have a huge debate around gig work, that is the work mediated through labor platforms and things like that. But we have never tried to link those with the changes in the financial sphere. What I'm arguing is that there's a huge connection between, changes which are happening in the financial sphere and change which is happening in the sphere of work. And it is important to connect really these two. The other concern is actually what I mentioned earlier as social policy ka financialization, or what I call as financialized social care, which I think is a paradox of welfare. Maybe we are now very happy that, benefit transfer is more efficient because it is done through the digital mode. But all the social services like health, education, housing are now exposed to market competition. So we are still protected a bit because of our informal institutions, but you know that in European markets, in Spain, etc., this was a very important housing market crash was a very significant economic sort of a crisis. So this kind of a paradox, you think we are actually delivering well-being, actually we are getting exposed to market competition. That is another paradox, I think, a concern for all of us, should be a concern for all of us. And of course, the social security payments, the exposure of social security payments like pension, insurance, savings, etc., to the vagaries of the financial market. Today, my financial savings must be worth 10,000 rupees. I'm not sure whether it would be the same tomorrow or it is actually going to be crashed to 1,000 rupees or even less than that. So that is the fear with which an average an investor who is forced to invest lives in. So there is a scenario where social policies are getting financialized, where you are required to engage with the financial market more and more, but your incomes are not increasing, your savings and credit growth has actually slowed down. So that's a concern that I think. So I think this new development sort of a paradigm, a new development dictum, that poor households must survive by loans. And if you want to get out of poverty, and then you need to link with financial markets. So actually we very automatically sort of link financial inclusion with poverty, as if to suggest that people are not financially included, the people are poor because they are financially excluded. The point is that they are financially excluded because they're actually poor. we are not able to afford, maybe those kinds of very intense engagement with the financial market. And that's because I'm a poor sort of a household. And that's why I'm not able to engage with financial markets. But the logic has been sort of, put upside down, that I think you are poor, because you have no financial engagement. So you link with the banks and financial institutions, you are going to be less poorer. So I think that is a very dramatically wrong sort of conceptualization. I think we need to maybe we need to try and get the debate back to reviving the real sector. We need to have more employment. We need to revive the manufacturing sort of kind of sectors. We need to have, we need to have more kind of socially secure the employment and kind of production arrangements, so that more people can sort of in a dignified manner, more people can gain kind of, a living wage out of those and kind of, opportunities and things like that. So livelihood security through more employment and more production activity, I think, seems to be a much more sustainable way of ensuring human dignity and human security, rather than pushing people to the vagaries of the financial market. So I think financial inclusion, I also argue that financial inclusion is actually projected as a state strategy towards addressing marginalization, but actually it validates a model of financialized development. It actually promotes a very high cost of financial service sort of a provision. There is no way we can refer to the real sector crisis, like manufacturing employment going down, or micro and small enterprise sector is not growing enough. Farming sector is facing a crisis in many parts of India. None of these debates are really picked up when we put all our emphasis on the financial inclusion sort of a thing. And of course, the financial inclusion debate also projects financial literacy as a determinant of well-being. So we all started talking about how to improve financial literacy, how do we train them so that people, these are all, I think that's where maybe what some of the earlier questions, the audience has raised in terms of how the Northeast is different from the rest of India. I think Northeast had a very local and very regional way of dealing with the financial institutions through their own collective institutions. Marups in Manipur, or village development councils, or other kind of traditional groups in other sort of belts, through reciprocity, solidarity, and things. I'm not really sort of celebrating all of that. They all have their own internal structural sort of inequities, but still these were very interesting time-tested instrumental arrangements which were rooted, embedded and grounded in people's own choices and strategies and requirements and challenges and things like that. So financial literacy, and if you do not know how to calculate interest rate in a particular fashion, you are not financially literate, is a notion which came in the 2000s through the coming in of OECD's support to India, and they came with certain kind of tools and materials and things like that. And now it is very widely accepted, and people are trained left, right, and center and things like that. And individualization is risks. When financialization happens, we also understand that risk is ours now. Nobody has a stake in it. The government has no stake in in an industrial accident that you encounter with. It is your call. You need to, or your employer will take care of it. The government may have created facilities like VOCW and like Construction Welfare Board and all that, but what are the problems of making those kinds of arrangements really work? So in conclusion, I'm not talking about microfinance, because a very interesting sort of a treatment on that was already done by Paramita. So in conclusion, I would say that the political rhetoric around financial inclusion, that is overwhelming emphasis on herding the poor to banks for opening accounts, but leaving them beyond the threshold when it comes to loans and financial services. You have shown them the doors to a bank, but the bank has not really supported you with loans or any credit or any kind of appropriate saving instruments. no financial support or anything. So as a political rhetoric, it must have really worked, but I don't think it has really helped, real people in real ways, in their real lived life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Nayak. It was an excellent and detailed presentation about all the nuances of finance. Now, what I gathered from your presentation, is my voice echo? Yeah, that, am I audible?
Yes.
Just a minute. Unka speaker on. Hello? Yes. So you have shown that that in spite of getting loans, they are caught in a vicious circle of poverty. On one hand, they are taking loans, and in the name of women, as you pointed out rightly, ma'am, 87% of women women are getting loan. 87% are getting in the names of the women. Women are the loan in the name of women, but they are using it either for buying things which are household goods, which may be not that important, and in the process, and particularly the marginalized section of women, the concept of microfinance, which was started by Mehboob-ul Haq, which became very famous and which gave him the Grameen finance. That kind of thing has not materialized. Here, women form small groups. I'm talking about absolutely the people in the rural areas who form their own groups, and they collect money in small SHG groups and then fulfill their needs. But this has not had that kind of impact. Institutionalized finance, of course, is far cry to materialize in terms of what you have explained. So how do you think that those marginalized section of women who are actually grappling to run their households, what should be done? Banks are okay. As you said, it is only rhetoric. It has not reached out to them in real terms. So what is your take on that? How we should get it started?
I think that's a very complex question also. It's not like that because, there is a, the first question is that we don't even know why do they need resources. Both banks and other organizations, other financial institutions would insist on women to start enterprises, and they really portray them as business, business purposes they are borrowing, etc., etc. That's actually not the purpose, may not be at all. Women are also responsible for, in the current scenario, in a very patriarchal, inequitable sort of a household setting, women still bear a lot of burden about social sort of investments like education, other kinds of investments to be made to kind of household well-being. Let me put it that way. So they would need resources for that. So my argument is that I think you don't put too much of emphasis on finance as the panacea for all these things. If you are able to create dignified, and remunerative employment opportunities for women, even something like MGNREGA in a rural area, if you are able to give a woman 100 days of employment at the wage rate promised by the state, that's income, isn't it? But we know how MGNREGA is carried out in many of these states. Either, nothing is carried out. Missions are taking care of the work. And I think of course, I know states like Gujarat, where I don't think, women are actually, the women in the tribal districts of Gujarat, every season go and knock at the door of the Taluka Development Officer months together asking for work, but there is no work. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not like you keep channelizing finance and credit at a particular cost to women. That's important. The state has a responsibility to make sure that if there are deficits in household budgets, which the state can really plug in, there should be arrangements to do that. But more importantly, what they need to do is they take care of, that's what, that you need to look at it as a composite phenomenon. A household needs to eat, household needs to seek health care, household needs to seek maybe education and things like that. So wherein the state can come in, the state can come in through by providing subsidized education. The state can provide subsidized healthcare. The state can provide, some resources so that in my old age, a worker gets some sort of a living wage as a pension or whatever, isn't it? So that's the responsibility of the state. So there's a state sphere within a household. Within a household, a state actually inhabits a space, but that space has been now opened up to market. If you have to have education for your child, there is a private school close by, go there, because the municipal school has closed down. Fine. Or the municipal school is not good enough, so I don't want to send my child there. So the state has abdicated its responsibilities from a large sections within the household, where the household would have actually gained real time. That's a gain in income. I have secured employment, dignified employment. My child goes to school. My healthcare is taken care of. I am assured of my old age. What else I need? I'm not going to come to a microfinance agency to get 50,000 loans so that I can send my daughter to a nursing school and my other daughter can go to a hospital to do her delivery. Simple as that. So that's the interconnection that I think we need to really look at. So I am not advocating any kind of an institutional. I'm not saying that banks are good and non-banking financial institutions are bad. That is one part of the story, because they are different institutions. They have different logics of functioning and things like that. But a household, an average household, must be able to kind of derive the benefits of its interaction with the state and save on its costs, living costs, so that it will be able to save income and live a dignified life. I
Right.
hope I answered.
Yes, ma'am. It's very clear. Thank you.
Ma'am, good afternoon. There's one question from Dr. Abida Akhtar,
Okay.
and this question is coming from the University of Kashmir, Srinagar, Jammu and Kashmir.
Right.
Can you kindly highlight some of the areas of research in the area of assessing financial empowerment of women? And additional question to this is, how can we measure the financial independence among women?
Okay. I didn't get the first question. Can you, you're talking about the literature? What is
That's, ma'am,
the financial empowerment?
some of the areas of research in the area of assessing financial empowerment of women.
Oh, okay. I think she perhaps has been asking for some sort of areas of work or something. Is that what?
Yeah, sounds like that. And
I know.
Maybe examples like Seva and Mandesh Mahila,
Right,
Family and Dastakar
right. I
and
think,
Kashmiri
yes.
women's craft work. And
Right. I think you can really see it as in multiple ways. One is you can look at, as Professor Vibhuti Patel has been, she was just mentioning, you can look at some of those interventions to find out what they did, what approach they followed, and how they impacted women and things like that. But otherwise, this is a completely uncharted area. We have done very little in terms of understanding some microfinance and some microcredit and things like that. But financial lives of women, let me tell you that this is also a matter of methodology. We are so clued on using secondary data, what other people, what other organizations institutionally provide and things like that. And there is a predominance of even this economistic quantitative techniques, in this kind of sphere. But you can actually you can actually have a transdisciplinary approach to understanding financial lives of women. I have seen interesting work which look at life history method, a few number, of subjects, maybe 10 or 12 women, but intensely following them. Because I think the moment you talk about, I think that's my understanding about, when you try to look at a financial life as a neutral, gender neutral space, it's much easier. You can talk about financial instruments, market and things like that. The moment you start talking about the financial involvement of a woman, it's important to look at, that subjectivity and the subjectivity of a woman and its interaction with financial market. Why does she want to get into market at all? What are the purposes for which someone really borrows or saves or understands insurance and things like that? These decisions would be very, very different, between maybe a male and a man and a woman. So there are interesting ethnographic sort of, and I would say that you need to have the eye of an ethnographer let me put it, a feminist researcher, because a feminist researcher classically is someone who will be able to really adapt different methodologies very creatively, and so that we are dissatisfied with the mainstream methodological sort of devices. So a feminist approach to finance would be very, very different from what we generally see here as how much you borrow, how much you repay. That's an important part of it. But then you need to really look at the experiential aspect of that. We all would generally take indicators of empowerment as the ability to repay. You ask them, are you feel confident enough to now attend a meeting? Then the woman say, I do feel confident. But then if you really go deeper into, the inquiry, you realize that she has really not changed her fundamental notions about, life or, like transformation. So I don't know, how do we say that as, empowerment in any way? So we must actually sort of, work together to create an Indian narrative of a feminist critique of these kinds of tendencies. That's the only way. We have umpteen number of literature and tools available, which came from different ideological and financial and material settings. But we need to really, explore further. I think our attempt was a very small step in that direction to find out, let's see whether detailed accounts and detailed inquiries and sitting with them for, days together would really help us understand, what are their sort of, priorities and challenges and all that. We got, I can tell you, we had a woman who told us prior to COVID, a slightly elderly woman say that I will not allow a microfinance institution to come to my threshold. That is a dishonor to me, which means come what may, I will repay the loan. So there is this honor as a very, very significant aspect, which really, really hovers around this as when women are involved. They are constantly worried how to protect their honor as a woman and, honor as an individual. So they don't want to really forgo that. That's one of the reasons why they go out of the way to service all the debt, all the loans they have incurred, things like that. The same woman post-COVID, I was talking to her over phone. She said that my house is inundated with, debt. Every time creditors, they're really sort of coming and standing at my doorstep asking for money back. In Hindi, she said, "Khana hajam nahi hota hai. I can't digest my food." So that is quite an experiential dimension of a woman's engagement with money. And the world, I think I did not mention anything about the COVID narratives at all, because it's very understandable that has really shattered the self-defense of many women, because they could not repay. The MFIs rescheduled for some time, but they kept coming back, very distressful and things like that. So banks are not going to touch them with a barge pole now after COVID. Banks are still away from, they must have moved further away from certain segments in the post-COVID scenario. And there were valid reasons for that. So I'm saying there is immense possibility, completely uncharted terrain, but you should be open to more innovative methodological experiments.
Remains a challenge in terms of.
Pardon? Did you say something, Praveen Kumar?
I mean, this uncharted thing, like in the decade of 21st century, still we have this need of bringing.
For me, voice is breaking, Praveen. I don't know, others are able to hear?
I'll just change to the microphone. Is it fine, ma'am, now?
No, right now it's fine.
Okay. So like still uncharted, and we are talking in 2023. I mean, still we have these challenges to face. I mean, the third decade of this century. And regarding the repayment, you invoked the honor thing about women. So I would have asked this question, but you answered it somehow. Like, I mean, this came that the repayment by women. I mean, of course, men might be taking more loans, and women are being helped now. So do we have some kind of substantial research on this also, some data that we can claim that women have actually on paper good enough to pay back to the banks the loans they have taken? And like they're not flaunting on such things. Do we have such areas also where we can maybe put some grace on them as the clients for the banking system?
No, my understanding is that in the earlier days, it was much easier to really talk about these things because there was more limited experiment in certain regions. And I think I have been part of certain evaluations in 2003, 5, late 1990s. We were much more confident in saying a lot of things, saying that, much more confident in attributing, much more confident in saying that, women enterprises are not generating enough income, so they are not able to repay. All sorts. Now, Praveen, the household finance portfolio is a complete mix-up of everything. It's extremely difficult for you to sit down and delineate. I think one of my kind of researchers who did study in Madras, in Chennai, Pondicherry area, she did a very interesting diagram where she sort of tracked one loan to 60 transactions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's the complexity of, borrowing and, lending and things like that. So it is actually very, very difficult. I think people have their own strategy. One thing I can tell you, women in many markets, which we consider as thriving markets of finance companies and all kinds of finance companies, etc. They have really sort of, mastered the strategies of negotiating, juggling this. So somebody must be kind of, generating. Somebody may not have even invested anything in their whatever namesake business, like small carts or push carts or small dukans or if home-based little sort of shops and things like that. But using that as a kind of a very minimal cash flow medium, she would juggle kind of repayment in multiple ways. As I told you, she may borrow from a typical money lender.
Yes.
In many households, one earner's income is actually sort of assigned for repayment. If you have two sons working in the market, one son's income is actually meant for repayment of different loans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's essentially a cash flow management, cash flow adjustment on a weekly, daily basis, because they know when the repayment needs to be made. So there is a little adjustment around that time that can range from a hand loan from the neighbor to the daily income that the son brought home.
Right.
But so I think it's very difficult now. This complexity is what we need to understand. So it's much easy to say that whether rate of return is good enough or not. If the rate of return is not good enough, they will not be able to. So if there's 17%, 26% interest rate is many of them are paying, that's a huge interest.
Huge. Yes.
But their enterprise may not be giving an ROI not more than 3-4%. So that's a gap. That's a standard calculation that we make. But I think the reality is beyond that. The distress it creates in women. The agony and the pain and the Paramita Saha was talking about, Professor Saha was talking about violence, which is not very seriously. Bangladesh Grameen Bank studies really talk very clearly about, at least a couple of studies talk about increasing domestic violence, but we really have not been, because in our situation it will be very difficult to make people think or make people talk freely about that kind of a situation. And anyway, they live in an everyday environment of violence. That's my point. You live a life of violence on a daily basis. because of your.
Um,
So I
yes.
think, so that's a complexity that I talk about.
Understood, ma'am. There's one question by Dr. Samita, and the question talks about the self-help groups, SHGs. So she's asked, should women's SHGs be working first on financial issues and then engage with feminist solidarity on empowerment, abuse, and equity issues, or it should be the other way around? I mean, first they go for fighting against like these empowerment issues, abuse, and all, or first they should work on the financial issues, making them strong on financial and then take them.
I think that sequencing can be very problematic. You know, one thing, personally speaking, I don't think SHGs have the capacity to actually be feminist collectives, because in many ways they are manufactured collectives. You know,
True, ma'am.
they have crafted together by someone for some other purpose. Feminist collectives are autonomous, coming together for a larger purpose, to change the, I think, change the order of the world. That's why the feminist collectives are formed. So in fact, there are interesting interesting studies, informed by certain kind of ideological persuasions, which very clearly argued that self-help groups cannot be power organizations. They can be functional collectives, and that's what we are seeing. So if they come together to sort of advance the agenda of feminist movement, I'll be extremely happy as a, and we have tried it. I think organizations have tried it, but it is very unlikely that organizations which are put together for transactional purposes grow into transformative collectives. It becomes very difficult. That path is beautiful to be and I think if we can really work on it, it'll be wonderful, but I really do not see an automatic translation. So I would say that if SHGs do good, progressive, developmental financial intermediation, let them do that. That the real empowerment which comes from real financial integration can give you enough power to maybe push other agenda. But I don't think we can really, there is an automatic switch where one will lead to the other. I'm not very, I think my observation of different kinds of SHGs all over the country wouldn't give me the confidence to say that SHGs are actually very, empowerment-oriented feminist solidarities. I don't believe in that. I may change my opinion later. As of now, no.
But still, that reality remains where we question this thing that maybe it can be the panchayat elections, it can be the SHGs also, or it can be anything like.
In a very transactional way, it can happen.
And you see changes coming up, ma'am? Like you see the changes.
Some states, I think you see definitely in Orissa, I see in certain pockets, women are able, women, especially elderly women leaders, are actually participating in more. And of course, our star examples are Telangana and, Andhra, Telangana and Kerala, where, these are massive women's. I don't know whether there's women's movements. They're massive women's collectivization.
Right.
Been able to achieve a lot. Even, I think, let me also tell you that in Velugu, SCRP in Andhra and Telangana, in the erstwhile situation, we're also able to even intervene in dispensing cases against violence against women. They had social action groups. All that is possible. But I really do not see that all that really becoming a feminist political movement. Okay, it should happen. Yeah.
But you keep that feminist political in a kind of movement away from this study, or
I'm not saying that it is somehow not being able to. I think I have not seen it integrating at all. Even if they seem to have been integrated, I see huge disconnections in that.
Right, ma'am. Just one last input. I mean, we are just looking at the questions in the chat also. How all these improvements in India or changes in India are being seen around the world? I mean, are we becoming an ideal case study for some other countries to follow, or or we still have like things which are happening? I mean, some contours are changing, some paradigms are shifting, and then some people are looking at us as maybe not a benchmark though, but do you see such things happening? Like they are taking us.
My question would be, who is looking at us? The vision
Right.
is different based on who looks at us. You know,
Cannot be the people who give loans. Then.
when an international monetary institution look at us, oh yeah, you're a huge market, you know, and you have been able to really spread microfinance all over the country. So you must be a huge success. But somebody like, you know, me or even Professor Vibhuti Patel or Paramita Saha looks from outside, maybe we see a lot of other things too. So in certain situations, we are maybe great example for some, but may not be. So I can only answer it that way.
That's optimistic one, I would say. It gives us a chance to grow.
Yeah.
Amen. Thank you. So participants, like we do have a chance to put up, I would say, simple questions and get very insightful answers. So all the participants, and we are fortunate that there are many of them who are writing that their PhD areas are like those things that you have answered. Dr. Anita will like to take it ahead. Okay, one more question we have.
There's one more question.
We'll just check out, ma'am. Okay, Q&A. You can. If we have missed the question from any participant, we request you to kindly put it in the chat box. Yes, Girija ji, maybe please have just your question here. Thank you for writing. Yeah, Dr. Anita, please.
There is a question by Ms. Girija. She says, at a time when crony capitalism is growing and government withdrawing the social security measures, how do you think a common man thinks of financial security?
That is the this is the question from Girija. That's a question, Girija. I really that's a kind of a catch, isn't it? We are saying that we can say that the state should step in. The state may say that, yeah, we are stepping in with a lot of transfers. You know, we are giving you gas and we are giving you, you know, other kinds of subsidies and, you know, and things like that. What do you call it? The dilemma that a common man faces exactly what you asked. The only thing we can say is that in the current narrative, we are actually asking everybody that, okay, you take an insurance product, you know, so that your health is taken care of. You take a pension you take a pension scheme so that your, you know, old age is taken care of. You enroll in a web portal so that you may be considered for social security and things like that, or your wages, you may get an employment and things like that. So in fact, you know, the common man is kind of, you know, reacting exactly the way I think I described, you know, trying to kind of, you know, do everything possible, you know, any kind of work, anything which comes one's way. I think so that's the only way in which kind of, you know, somebody can really, I think I'm also quite perplexed by that question, but it's very difficult. The only thing we can say is that, okay, everybody is trying their own way. We think that, okay, let's organize workers so that they can ask for better wages and better terms. Or we say that, okay, let's actually ask for more allocation from the state so that, you know, MG and REGS happens smoothly. You know, you can ask for more kind of, you know, support for farmers so that, you know, small farming becomes much more smooth. Let's say that, okay, women unpaid or underpaid or you know, precarious women workers get more social security. So I think it has to, all these only can, because, you know, your question should be, we need to also to clarify who are we talking about? Which person has to ensure that, you know, whose security are we talking about? So it's such a vast variety of kind of, informal kind of, work and informal living sort of situation we have. So it's a mind-blowing variety that we are living with, mind-blowing varieties of vulnerabilities that we'll be living in. I think securing one's life is also a very complex question. So I would just say that, each of us should do what is possible with, any of these things to push certain agenda forward. That's why I think I really do not know how you can, I would be at a loss to advise a low income household to say that, you must live this way. One thing I personally do is that, I have taken a kind of, a formal sector pension kind of, insurance cum pension policy for the behan who helps me, the lady who helps me. So I got overwhelmingly kind of, one day got alarmed by the fact that if I go away, she has been working with me for fairly about 15, 16 years, almost like a, member of my house. She takes care of everything. I realized that if I move away, then she has nothing. So I, with all my critique of the world of finance, went and purchased a pension product from a bank in her name. She will not be able to afford it. Let me tell you that. If I stop that premium in a year, she is not going to continue with that policy because that's not for her. That product is not meant for her. So you need to, we really have some insurance products, like we have Ayushman kind of a scheme, we have health schemes. But if you look at the coverage, it is not really reaching out. If the products are offered, then the allied services are not aligning with, them. Hospitals are not close by. Hospitals not entertaining these kinds of, people. Banks are not opening their doors and things like that. So I think it's not only, let me tell you that schemes must be made to function. You can actually help a person to really get into these kinds of things. Ask a worker to kind of, register in an e-shram portal. Ask that person to really get into all the available government, enroll into all the available government schemes so that, she or he can get the benefit of all that. You must make sure that that person demands work if she's living in a rural area under MGNREGS. Go to the kind of, Gram Panchayat office and ask for work and things like that. So you can actually make the person more responsible to claim these services, but there's no guarantee that the services are actually automatically granted to you. So I think now a lot of intermediaries, like the organization that I work for right now, I work for research, but the practice organization has made it a point to really kind of, make sure that all the entitlements that are available for workers are made available to them through facilitation centers. Through legal aid, there is huge wage theft in our informal sector. Like, people are not paid enough, the entire wage that they are promised. So in those situations, we're intervening legally, kind of fighting cases in the labor court and getting that money to them. So I think being aware of, these kinds of rights and things like that. So conscientization, mobilization of, people who are disadvantaged is a very important part of that education and things like that. So, a construction worker doesn't know what is the minimum wage. That is the scenario within which we work. A woman is willing to spend an hour of hers for a kind of 2 rupee a piece rate without any complaint. Isn't it? So how do you really sort of grapple these kinds of things? So I think these are more profound questions which need not this kind of bhashans would really help. We need to do a lot of things.
Things on the ground. Yeah, man. Like the change has to be visible that way, and financial literacy, financial empowerment will be going hand in hand. If we, yes, ma'am. And there are some questions. However, the answers just came. Like, in what way we can measure the economic empowerment? Like, what can be the benchmark or maybe the touchstones about that thing? Interesting.
No, I think multiple ways in which people have measured economic empowerment, like you can, the crux of empowerment is actually agency, control over resources and things like that. So you can actually create, and I think others are immensely qualified to answer that question. But in my way, in my opinion, you can actually define empowerment the way you are looking at it, and you can create enough indicators, like for instance, the conventional indicators have been, like how much she used it for her enterprise, and whether she feels confident, and whether she has a control over the enterprise, or somebody else controls it, and all that. These are all valid indicators. A woman is made to borrow, and if she is not controlling the environment, I think that kind of a question would definitely answer whether I borrowed, whether you have
Right.
control over the resources. Asking and verifying the other way, like through that can be done only through very intense field work and things like that. You spend enough time with your subjects, so that that substantively this kind of a control happens, or it is just a feeling of okay, I sit in my shop, but major decisions are taken care of still by. So empowerment can be really broken down into multiple indicators of mobility. These are the conventional thing, as as anybody else kind of knows, mobility, decision making, ownership, so those kinds of indicators can be used to find out whether what is the degree of all this in experienced by women, or even in actual manifestation. These are the ways in which, but I think that maybe we should think about a little. My suggestion was to go a little further beyond and look at the experience of empowerment a woman has in terms of agency, her own self-worth while going through all this, borrowing, lending, servicing multiple debts, and like all that, what kind of life transformations have come in her life, etc., are also very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We do have the answers given to the questions Dr. Girija had asked, Dr. Roy had asked. And we really appreciate, ma'am, your time and this extended conversation, I would say the session, and then this question answers as well. So any observations you feel you want to leave us with, like for further
Thank you
study?
so very much. I think I realized that, because, since I speak based on perhaps my work,
Yeah.
It goes in a particular direction. So I was quite doubtful as to whether that will actually sort of go with a fairly large, and diverse community of sort of researchers, writers, etc. And I'll be extremely happy if anything has been sort of communicated the way I would have, I would have loved to sort of do. I would be very happy, to continue this conversation, because this is a field which I've spent long years, as an observer, participant, critique, now slightly away from it from another angle. So I'll be very, very happy if any of the participants also sort of wants to have a kind of a conversation. And even as a learner, I consider myself to be still learning more and more about such a complex field. Thanks so much for this opportunity. Being able to talk to a larger crowd like this, it's very, very, especially in the current world scenario. So it's been really wonderful. Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
So we are really pleased to extend thanks to you, and on behalf of the RDU, these two sessions are
I can leave now, isn't it? Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Dr. Banerjee. Thank you.